What's up everyone? Before we get started with today's video, I have a quick question. Have you ever been in a situation where you wanted to watch something, but of course it wasn't available in your location? Some of my videos. Well, thanks to Nordvpn, that won't be an issue anymore. With Nordvpn, you can spoof your location and make it seem like you're browsing the internet from another country and get access to content that is technically not available in your region. Whether it's for sports, streaming sites, or other content, that's all up to you. Along with that, Nordvpn also makes your online experience safer with threat protection, a feature that blocks intrusive ads and web trackers, all while scanning downloads from malicious files. If you want to have more freedom online all while still protecting your privacy, Nordvpn is definitely for you. Right now, there are 3 options to choose from with crazy savings. You got standard, plus, and complete, and you can either go with just the VPN or even get a password manager and even some secure cloud storage. And when you sign up for 2 years, you get 1 month free. It's easy to set up, it connects and disconnects easily, and you get full control to all of your devices, and best of all, it's risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee, so you really got nothing to lose. So click the link in the description down below or the pinned comment, or just simply go to nordvpn.com/wrestlinggifts and get the easy-to-use Nordvpn to make your life on the internet better and more secure, all while still supporting the channel. That's nordvpn.com/wrestlinggifts. Shout out to Nordvpn for sponsoring today's video, but now it's time for today's feature presentation. It's crazy to think that once upon a time, this is what wrestling games used to look like. Before there ever was a 2K wrestling game series, before there ever was a Smackdown, hell, before most of us were even born, the generation before us grew up on games such as WrestleMania on the NES, a game that had 6 wrestlers and less than 10 moves, but for the time was definitely revolutionary. Yo, before No Mercy and Smackdown, they grew up on games such as WrestleFest from 1991, where the kids back in the day would go to their local arcade, find a machine, put in 25 cents, mash a joystick and press 2 buttons and still have the time of their lives. From WrestleMania to WrestleFest to Mortal Kombat clones, once upon a time, wrestling games were very simple. You pressed a few buttons, you hit a few moves, your mom yelled at you to stop playing, and you called it a day. And as time went on and as we were born and we got introduced to wrestling games, the technology just kept advancing. Before you knew it, we went from press B to do 1 of 3 moves to press L1 and let's jump off Times Square and kill ourselves. And honestly, we got really lucky. We grew up during the prime years of wrestling games, during the SVR years. But just like how now in 2023, me and you still get nostalgic for Smackdown vs. Raw 15 years later, back in the 2000s, as crazy as it sounds, there were people that were nostalgic about games like WrestleFest and WrestleMania. Just like us now, there were people that missed their childhoods, grown-ups who missed the wrestlers of the 80s and 90s, idiots like Coco Beware that we could care less about. There was a whole generation that missed playing as them. They missed how simple the games were, they missed the feeling of going to an arcade and mashing a few buttons and having fun. And back in 2007, while me and you were just hyped about the next SVR game, little did we know that those crazy bastards at THQ and Yukes were going out of their way and making a game just for that generation. Behind the scenes, they were taking the wrestlers of the 80s and 90s and they were giving them all the steroids you could possibly imagine. They were taking the Smackdown vs. Raw games and dumbing them down so much that you would think Eugene was the lead developer. They took SVR and they changed the controls, the moves, the gameplay, the entire aesthetic. They made a roster unlike anything we had ever seen before, and just 3 months after SVR09 came out, THQ released a brand new wrestling game. A game not meant for us, but a game for the older generation. It was Legends of WrestleMania. Legends of WrestleMania was a love letter to the golden age of wrestling. Wrestlers jacked to the gills, so much cocaine that your PlayStation 3 was probably high. This was a game that was supposed to take you back to the 80s and 90s, and if there's one thing that this game did right, it was definitely that. And yo, back then, compared to what we were used to, this shit was just different. The roster in this game was of course all legends. Wrestlers from back in the day, wrestlers from the arcade machines that we talked about were finally back on video game screens. Crackheads like Kamala and Greg Valentine that would never make it to SVR were here. All the arenas in the game were just WrestleManias from 1985 until 1999. There was no Raw, there was no Smackdown, it was just classic WrestleManias from back in the day. And this was such a trip back in 2009. You gotta remember, the games that we grew up on, the SVR games, they weren't about nostalgia. They were all all about the present. It wasn't like today where every legend is in the game and you get a bunch of old arenas every single year. Nah, back then we would get like max 10 legends, maybe one old arena, and that was it. But then this game came out and it was really the first WWE game to truly celebrate the past. This was a game that even though I didn't know what the fuck a Big John stud was, it sounds concerning, I still wanted this game and I still wanted to play it. And I'll never forget downloading the demo for this game on the PlayStation Store a week before the game officially came out. And I just remember sitting there just waiting for it to finish, and for those 30 minutes while it was downloading, I was just imagining how epic and how awesome this game was gonna be. This magical wrestling game about the Legends of WrestleMania, and just being so excited to play it. And then I will never forget the game finally downloading, starting it up, choosing my first match, being so excited, the match starting, pressing a few buttons, and then just being there like, Legends of WrestleMania, like I said, was a trip. I was 11 years old and I had never been more confused playing a wrestling video game in my life. Yo, my dumbass was expecting an SVR game with legends. Instead, we got a game that really felt like it was made in 1991. This was a game that was truly made for the arcade generation. A game in which all you could really do was punch, kick, do like 5 grapples, hit your finisher, and call it a day. No lie, when I first played this game as a kid, I genuinely thought it was the worst wrestling game ever. Like fam, you couldn't even run properly in this game. You couldn't break any tables. There were barely any weapons. The wrestlers were so slow that you would think they popped a few pills before the match, and they probably did. It felt like all I could do was the same move over and over again, and every other move for some reason ended up having a quick time event. And the controls, yo, don't even get me started on the controls. The controls in this video game did not make any sense. To run, you had to double press circle. What the fuck do you mean double press circle to run? Half of the time I wanted to run, I just ended up pinning the other guy. The grapples were so slow, climbing the top rope was a mission, and even matches I was excited to play. Matches like a ladder match that I thought you could never mess up ended up being so limited and so simple, it didn't make any sense. There was absolutely no freedom in this game. This was like the North Korean national wrestling game. And God forbid you turned up the difficulty, because the CPU in this game was the most OP, the most savage CPU I had ever seen. They did not show any mercy whatsoever. It was no doubt the simplest yet the dumbest wrestling game I had ever played in my life, and I truly hated it. And I was a kid who even played the N64 games like Attitude and Warzone, but for some reason this game just pissed me off as a kid. I was comparing this game back in 2009 to WrestleMania 21. That's how bad I thought this game was. I truly hated it. I couldn't figure it out. I didn't see anything redeeming in it. And after playing it back in 2009, after playing the demo and even renting it from Blockbuster, I returned this game and I never ever thought I would play it again. For some reason it became personal, and like, yo, this game, I just really felt like it did me dirty back in the day. And for 13 years I pretended this game did not exist. But that was 2009. Now we're in 2023. And after all these years, after going back and playing it, after all the context and everything, after knowing that this wasn't supposed to be a game with freedom, this wasn't supposed to be SVR with legends, and knowing that this was supposed to be a tribute to the classic arcade games, that this was for the generation that maybe stopped playing wrestling games, I gotta say, looking back at it, this game is pretty cool. Yes, everything I said still annoys me. Running in this game is stupid. Every wrestler only has like 5 moves, but still, despite all of that, this game has a lot of charm. At the end of the day, they still pulled off what they wanted to pull off. They made a game that really captured the magic of the 80s and 90s arcade wrestling games and 80s and 90s wrestling, and they brought it back to life. This wasn't supposed to be a simulation. This was an arcade beat 'em up with these jacked up superheroes that anyone could pick up and play, except for me apparently, and have simple arcade fun. That's why this game is just punch, kick, and a few grapples. That's why everything is simple, and that's why the game is filled with quick time events. It's funny because now when I play this, and now that I see this as I'm older and I know everything that went on and what this game was supposed to be, I see it for what it is, and that's a modernized WrestleFest. And now I really do see how cool all of this really was. Looking back at this and playing this, going back to these old WrestleMania arenas with these roided up wrestlers and just fighting, it's cool. It's cool seeing how they made a game so simple, yet a game that had still so much soul. You got 40 wrestlers from back in the day, all the old WrestleMania arenas, JR and King on commentary, and the matches even play out like the old school matches from back in the day. This is a game that no doubt will transport you back to 1991. They do have so many cool animations that were just in this game, and yeah, the matches rarely last over 5 minutes, but it's all good. The quick time events do have some sick animations, and they do result in sequences and moments that we never got in SVR, and sequences that are really awesome to look at. It's fun building up your momentum and unlocking new moves to do with your momentum tier, and then doing your finisher and it being a quick time event that has all your signatures mixed in as well. So when you hit a finisher in this game, like it really is a finisher. It's basically like a Mortal Kombat fatality. And all I can say is I can only imagine how cool this was for kids who grew up in the 80s and 90s and as adults got this game, and they got a game that was basically a tribute to their childhood. And without a doubt, the coolest feature in my opinion was the fact that you could import the entire SVR 2009 roster into this game. All you had to do was go to the main menu, go to the big ass import button, and just like that, everyone's imported and they had their full entrances, they had movesets that were tailored to this game, and I had just so much fun trying out the different SVR characters in here. And sure, they do look out of place, you know, very out of place, they definitely need some more juice and a 10, but just the fact that this was possible, it's really cool to see. There is just something fun about playing as SVR09 Cena in a totally different game with a totally different and weird controls and a limited moveset, and it actually feels like a mod, something you're not supposed to do, yet it somehow works. Being able to do this, especially back in 2008, 2009 technology, and even now in 2023 just playing as SVR09 characters in this game, it really makes the game for me. It makes the gameplay so much more fun, and it's just a crazy visual to see. You gotta appreciate it. This game took a huge chance, and yeah, it's not all good, okay? You play like 10 matches and you've probably seen everything this game has to offer, but I appreciate the effort so much more now. I love the beat 'em up style, I love the aesthetic, I love how the managers act in this game. You know, they act like how managers did back in the day. They don't act like the managers in SVR. I love how every Hell in a Cell match for some reason is a perfect recreation of Undertaker versus Mankind. Yeah, it is kind of stupid how every Hell in a Cell match starts at the top and once you go down you can't go back up, but I still respect it because it stays true to the core idea of being a simple linear beat 'em up style game. You don't need to do any special moves to break the cage in a designated zone and climb up. Nah, you just start up there, you go down, you finish the match, and that's it. And even though as a kid I hated how the ladder matches were so simple and I couldn't do a 360 no scope off the top of a ladder, now as an adult, I get it, because back in the 90s, the ladder matches were very simple compared to what we see these days, so of course they were going to be simple in the game. And I've said simple so many times in regards to this game, but I guess what I'm trying to say is, even though it is simple, the effort they put into this is far from that. For what this game was supposed to be, in my opinion, they absolutely killed it. This was never supposed to be a game that the mass audiences were gonna love, and honestly, it was never gonna be a game worth $60, but just looking at what they accomplished, it's awesome. And lastly, when it comes to Legends of WrestleMania, I also feel like we gotta give this game some more credit. Because low-key, this game is responsible for something that has become a fan favorite in wrestling games to this day. What was special about this game was there was no career mode in here, there was no season mode or even a road to WrestleMania. Instead, what we got was a WrestleMania tour mode. A mode where you get to go back in time, and for the first 15 WrestleManias, you get to relive, rewrite, and redefine them. Sound familiar? Yes, before we ever got a showcase mode, before the Attitude Era mode, before 30 years of Mania, before it all, this is where it all began, and honestly, this was pretty generational. Like I said before, the games that we grew up on weren't about nostalgia, they were about the present, and we were never able to go back in time and truly relive matches until this game. Now we were able to go back in time to a bunch of vintage arenas and play out matches filled with cutscenes and moments that were replicating what happened in real life perfectly. This was the first time where the past was truly celebrated in a WWE game. This wasn't just, oh, here are a few legends. No. Now we could go back to 1990 and play through Warrior vs. Hogan, and it looks like 1990 as if it was being aired on TV, and you could recreate it all, even the sus moments. So we got to relive Shawn vs. Austin or Austin vs. Rock in its full glory, or you can even go back in time and change up the matches, change the winner, or recreate the matches with different stipulations. Even though it was a short mode, it was such a well-made mode that put everything in place for us to eventually get Showcase mode, which is a staple to this day. And it's funny because Showcase mode is the main seller for 2K23 coming out in 2 weeks, right? Like, oh, Showcase mode for John Cena. And it all started here. But no one ever talks about it. No one ever gives this game credit for that. And I really think that this mode and this game does deserve credit for what it did. Legends of WrestleMania, I'll say it one last time, was a simple game. You play like 10 or so matches and you have seen it all. You finish tour mode and you're basically done the game. And as a result, this was a game that did not sell well and wasn't the best received. Critics didn't mind it, but that's because they played it for a quick review and just moved on after this. But the average wrestling gamer who spent $60 on it and was done playing after 2 days, most of them hated it. Hell, even I hated it as a kid. My friends hated it. It was something that we were so excited for, but it never really became a staple in our childhoods. It just passed us by. And so the game never got a sequel. It's a game that's often forgotten, and I'm sure that some of you guys watching this didn't even know this existed. But despite all of that, despite me hating so many things about this game, like the controls, the running, and everything, looking back at it now in 2023, I really respect this game. Yo, this was something that the developers made with the 80s and 90s kids in mind, and they fully went in there and they did it up to the max. They didn't half-ass it. They didn't try to appeal to the SVR fans. This was a game that was made by and made for kids of a generation that grew up with games like this. And for that, I respect it. I respect the attention to detail, I respect the effort, and I did have fun going back and playing it. Was it a pain in the ass? Yes. Was it hard? Yes. Was it annoying? Definitely. But it was a breath of fresh air, especially now in 2023. And it's one of those things where as time passes, you really get to see how awesome and how cool this definitely was. Because now in the modern day, I can only hope and imagine that we get something like this ever again. This wasn't just a mode, this wasn't just a showcase placed in SVR09 where we got to play in some old arenas and some old wrestlers. They made a full game that not only captures a time period, but actually plays like the time period. It's like, imagine them making a Smackdown game right after 2K23 that plays like Here Comes the Pain. We would love it. And maybe kids of today would think it's too simple and that it sucks and they would hate it. And it's funny because that's kind of what happened here. As a kid, I hated this game, but if only I knew that this game wasn't for me back then. And now, all these years later, all I can really do is just appreciate the game and appreciate the fact that they even made a game for the generation before us. At least that generation got something like this. We will probably never get something like this ever again. 2K can barely make one yearly game. We can never ask them for two. So even though I hated this as a kid, I'm so happy this exists. I'm so happy that I went back and played this, and I actually had a lot of fun playing this. Legends of WrestleMania was not the best game, it was far from it, but as time goes on and as I really look at it and I went back and played it, I gotta say, in its own way, it was special. In the comments down below, let me know any memories you guys have of Legends of WrestleMania, whether it's playing the demo on the PlayStation Store, whether it's the full game, the tour mode, anything, whether it's how hard the game was, because I know for a fact I'm not the only one who as a kid didn't know what the hell I was doing in here. Let me know down below. I always read all the comments, so I can't wait to hear your stories. It's your boy Pav, aka Wrestling Gifts. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I will see you guys soon with more content coming soon. I'm really about to start heating up and dropping a lot more content, so stay tuned for that. Thank you guys for the support. Thank you guys for the love. It's your boy Pav, aka Wrestling Gifts, and I'm out of here. Take it easy, guys.